Hello, this video is to demonstrate and discuss my 1967 Univox U-305r, also known as the Fat Boy amplifier. This amp has a single 15-inch Jensen speaker. In this schematic, it is noted as having 6973 power tubes. These power tubes were used a lot by Valco back in the day, which who made Supro, Gretsch, Airline, all those amplifiers. And if you look back in my videos, you'll see a couple of their amps with the 6973 power tubes demonstrated on my channel. These are noted as being the tube that were used by Jimmy Page on the first two Led Zeppelin albums to get that kind of raunchy tone that he got on tracks like Heartbreaker. But in the example that I have, there are 7591 power tubes rather than these 6973s. I believe they are similar electronically, they just have a different base. The 6973s has the miniature 9-pin base, while the 7591s have octal bases. They are also similar to the 7868 power tubes, which have the much larger bases with the pins that go right through the glass. This amp also has a couple of other peculiarities. As you can see here, it has tremolo. It also has reverb. The reverb is driven in a kind of a unique way. You don't see very much. This one is driven by a 6AN8 tube. And anytime you see an 8 at the end of your tube designation like that, chances are it is probably what's known as a triode pentode, or a pentode triode, however you want to say it, in that it has a pentode and a triode within the same envelope. And if you look back at some of my other videos as well, you'll see I kind of have an affinity for these tubes. They kind of offer you a bit of flexibility that you just don't seem to get with a 12AX7 because of the higher gain pentode within this envelope. It opens up some possibilities for circuits that you just don't get with dual triode tubes like 12AX7s or 12AT or 12AU7s. And again, anytime you see an 8 at the end of a designation like that, like a 6AN8 or 6AW8 or any of those, or GA8 is one that I've used. Those are always pentodes and triodes, and again, that's 5 elements plus the 3 equals the 8. So that's how you can usually tell you've got one of those on your hands. Whenever the signal comes out of the reverb tank here, you can see it goes through a 6AV6 on this schematic. This is not present in the version that I have either. I think actually this job is done in mine with a 12AU7, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, several differences then from this version of this schematic. But this is the only one that I saw online, so this is what I had to go with. You'll see here a big question mark with some lines running to encircle these components here, these little caps. These 0.01 microfarad caps on before the grids of the first tubes on either channel, those are not present in the version that I have. And in the effort to chase down a problem that I later found out had to do with a disconnected wire. Actually, this wire was partially disconnected on the output transformer. I'm looking at it and burn up the output transformer trying to find this problem, but I was getting a lot of just a great deal of crackle and buzz and just intermittent problems, and it turned out to be this little wire right here was not all the way connected. So little problems like that, you can spend a lot of time trying to chase something down. But anyway, I went ahead and installed these in my example in pursuit of this issue. And actually, I went ahead and changed almost every cap in this entire amp. Not necessarily in pursuit of that problem, but just because it needed it anyway. The caps were all oil-filled caps, and by the time those get old, a lot of times they're leaky, both electronically and physically leaky. But at any rate, this is the schematic, and let's check out some of the sounds. Before we demonstrate the tone of this thing, we might as well take a look at the inside. This amp, when I got it, was full of oil-filled capacitors in all these positions. These were all oil-filled. They've all been replaced. These are the caps on the inputs before the grids of each half of the first 12AX7 that I added, that were present in the schematic that I have available, but not present in this example. You can see all of the caps have been replaced, and here's a helpful tip: if you ever get one of these that has a PCB board like this with the mounted components, the best thing to do when you clip these off is leave as much lead as you can from the old component, and just bend your new components into a circle and cut them to the right length, and solder them on top of the board. With this thing, there's such little access, unless you were to take the entire board out and do it that way, which still you risk messing up and burning your board traces. You can see underneath, it has a little window, but there's very limited room to do any work. There's your tubes. One other tip here, you can see the black tape on the output transformer there. That's because on the top of this transformer are the actual B+ leads. And before I put that tape there, they were completely exposed. So if you reach up under this thing, feeling around for tubes or trying to wiggle a tube or whatever, even look for your power cord, what have you, you run the risk of touching one of these leads, and there you see the yellow wire there and the red wire over here. They were just completely exposed. So if you come up here like I did and you accidentally touch this thing, you're going to get quite the shock of about 300 to 400 volts of B+ right across your fingers. So that's been at least covered up somewhat. Not a great design there as far as I'm concerned, but if you have one of these, be very, very careful. So yeah, I mean, not much room to work underneath here, and also you could see, I don't know if you could see it or not, but the leads that are running from the transformer are basically just plugged in here. This lead had actually come partially loose and was just kind of dangling there, I guess, by one thread. So it was intermittent when I got it and doing a lot of noise and a lot of other things. So that was taken care of. All of the caps again replaced. You can see here some of the polarized caps replaced also. All of them in the same manner. All these caps replaced. This is a bias for the cathode of this tube. The other one is just going direct to ground, and the reason is these tubes were so mismatched. By the time you calculated for plate dissipation, you really needed to. This was the original. Both cathodes were tied together. This was the original bias resistor for both tubes, and they were biased with just this one resistor, which was a 10 ohm. And the wire came in here for that. And instead of using this, which wasn't doing either of these any favors, I added these resistors to bias this tube at a different level than this tube, because they were so mismatched that it was necessary to bring those more together. 7591s, they're not exactly growing on trees, and I don't have any in my stash, so trying to it would have been best to try to match some tubes and get them in here, but to use the tubes that were here, this is a good fix, and they are pretty close now to being biased together. You could see this diode was also put in, as was this little terminal strip. The diode that was here in this position before was a selenium diode. This guy here. which is, you know, by modern standards, is not something you really want in here anymore. So that's been replaced. For an example of what the capacitors looked like, here's one of them that was pulled out. Atlas oil capacitors. So these are all oil filled, and you know, none of these were physically leaking inside the amp, but it was best just to pull those out regardless. To leave them in was probably just asking for trouble down the road. These actually were I have this one and one other left here that I haven't thrown away yet, but these were over here on the transformer, something like this, and were actually the death caps. So those have been removed because we put in a three-prong cord with the ground. So we've got a grounded cable. One other tip, if you have one of these amps, this is the foot switch for the tremolo. It turns the tremolo on and off. When you put the switch in, it decouples this connection here, and actually will use the switch then. But when these are coupled, your tremolo will be always on. If these are in the slightest bit bent, which this one was grossly bent and distorted, and these weren't even touching at the time I got it. So that needed some work to get the tremolo really going and staying on. So if you have any problems with your tremolo on this, that might be your first place to look. You know, a lot of times it's the caps for the tremolo that you also want to replace. But this will be another good place to look if you're having tremolo issues with this model. But yeah, you can see there the big honking 15-inch Jensen, and this Jensen, I think I mentioned before, it was a C-15P, but it's actually a C-15PS. Date codes 1967, 18th week. This reverb tank is a replacement. But so yeah, so that's the inside of the amp. Let's take a look at some of the tones. Okay, here is the amplifier itself. This one is pretty tall cabinet. It has to house this big Jensen 15-inch speaker. It's a C-15P speaker. Here is the first channel, which has a bright and a normal input, volume, tone, reverb control, and tremolo speed and intensity. Here's the second channel with a bright and normal, volume, and tone only. For the purpose of this demo, I'm using a Gibson SG, and we'll check out some of the tones. Great reverb. The reverb is just barely on right there. There it is, off completely. But really deep reverb. Really nice tremolo as well. So yeah, very deep reverb, very nice tremolo. Again, you have bright and a normal input. The normal input just really tones down the overall gain. Makes it a much cleaner amp. Nice bright sound too. I mean, even with an SG, I mean, you're not going to get lost in the mix with the tone up around 5 or above. That's a 1967 Univox U-305, also known as the Fat Boy.